Welcome, Nacho Knots, to another episode of Nachos, the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. Today is Monday, July 14th, and whether this is your first listen or your 15th, I am glad that you are here. This week, we're doing something a little different. Instead of just one quote, we've got two. And no, it's not because I couldn't choose, though that's always a possibility. It's because these two sit so closely together in spirit that they practically finish each other's sentences. Here's the first. Real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present. And that was Albert Camus. And here's the second. The best way to take care of the future is to take care of the present moment. Thich Nhat Hanh. Two very different thinkers, an existentialist and a Zen monk, offering us the same invitation. Be here now. Show up fully for this moment and trust that your presence is enough. Your presence is the offering. It's a timely reminder, especially in a world that constantly tells us to chase the next thing, optimize the next moment, fix ourselves from some imagined future. These quotes gently nudge us back into today and not tomorrow, not as a place to tolerate. Today should never be a place to tolerate, but as the only place where we can truly belong. And that, dear Nacho Knots, is where we'll start today, with the power of presence and the gift of attention and the quiet kind of bravery it takes to stop running and just notice. And here's the paradox so many of us ride with every day. We crave the comfort of a crystal clear plan, yet we ache for the spaciousness of presence. For many neurodivergent brains, planning feels like building a life raft before setting foot into the river. Each calendar block or checklist, a plank of predictability that keeps the unknown from swallowing us up whole. But the very tools that promise safety can quietly siphon away our actual experience. We map tomorrow's terrain so meticulously that we drift past today's scenery, missing the texture of a breeze, the lift of a laugh, the cue from our own body that says, hey, water would be nice right now. And on the flip side, swinging entirely into presence has its own traps. Lose the anchor of structure for too long, and basic needs start fraying. Meals skipped, meds forgotten, deadlines lurking like uninvited guests. We might feel gloriously in flow at 2 a.m. and utterly disoriented when the sun comes up. Presence without even a sketch of a plan can leave us tending fires that went out hours ago. So what do we do with this tug of war? We learn to let planning serve presence, not replace it. Think of a schedule as scaffolding, not as a sarcophagus. A gentle outline, 3 priorities, a breathing room buffer, a reminder to stand up and stretch can hold us enough to stay regulated while still leaving space for serendipity. And when presence starts to slip, we come back to the little rituals that restitch body to moment. A sip of water, a palm pressed to the desk, a 5-second gaze out of the window. Planning gives the nervous system permission to relax. Presence gives the plan its pulse. Balancing the two is less about perfect mastery and more about rhythmic adjustment. Our own PB&J of predictability and joy, spread generously across the toast of daily life. And here's where the personal meets public. Every day we recalibrate the plan presence seesaw, yet we do it against the backdrop of systems that still expect us to slot neatly into categories they wrote without us. When grocery store fluorescents feel like interrogation lamps or open office chatter ricochets through our skulls, we're constantly asked, often on the spot, what do you need? What do you need? And Disability Pride Month reminds us that naming those needs isn't an inconvenience, it's a right. It's the quiet rebellion of saying, my sensory breaks aren't weaknesses, they're wiring instructions. Or closed captions aren't extra, they're oxygen. And speaking of pride, remember to mark your calendars for July 28th. No, it's July 29th, because I'll be sharing that message with the Detroit Regional Chamber and later that same day on that Tuesday in Lansing at the Breaking Barriers, an open to all celebration of disability pride. Details are on my website, and I'd love to see some nacho knots in the crowd. So check it out. Now, that the act of self-definition that we talk about when we talk about disability pride is also why autism research matters. When it's done with, not on, our community. Each new study, from genetics to live experience surveys like ours on Humanities 101, is another lens aimed at the intricate ways our brains navigate the world. The goal isn't to pathologize the daily tightrope we walk, but to illuminate it, to carve out language and leverage for better supports. That's what I did in my article that you can access from humanities101.org, where I talk about the way that workers can leverage better supports for neurodivergence at work. So as we celebrate Disability Pride Month, let's carry both of these truths. The struggles we face are real, and the science that seeks to understand them can be a tool we wield, shaping policies, designing environments, and ultimately affirming that our neurodivergence is not a problem to fix, but a perspective to honor. Just as we're reclaiming the right to name our own needs, the science is beginning to speak our language. On July 9th of this year, a huge study in Nature Genetics followed more than 5,000 autistic children plus nearly 2,000 siblings in the SPARK project. And it showed that the spectrum naturally sorts into 4 dependable profiles. And the researchers didn't line people up by severity. They looked at the real life patterns, milestones, co-occurring conditions, genetics, and they let the data cluster itself. So what they found was that there were 4 categories. The social and behavioral challenges categories makes up the largest lane. People in this group hit walking and talking milestones on schedule, but juggle classic autistic communication traits alongside high rates of anxiety, ADHD, or depression. Their strongest genetic signals switch on after birth, hinting that supports aimed at school-age social demands and mental health scaffolding could make the biggest dent. Next is the mixed ASD with developmental delay group, where milestones arrive late, yet psychiatric add-ons are lighter. Here, the genetic drivers act before birth while the brain's blueprint is still being drafted, which suggests early intervention therapies, think speech, OT, and PT, can catch more neural rush hours. On the quieter side sits the moderate challenges group. Traits are milder, no delays, no extra diagnosis. Their genes carry smaller tweaks, proving mild doesn't mean imagined, just wired differently. And finally, broadly affected children or humans face the toughest mix: significant delays, social hurdles, and mental health load, alongside the heaviest burden of brand new mutations in genes vital to early brain growth. So these 4 categories, but why should we care? Because this research shifts us from a single blurry label based on severities or spiciness to 4 sharper portraits that demand tailored care. It gives families firmer ground to request insurance coverages, lets educators match supports to developmental timing, and it arms self-advocates with proof that our differences aren't preferences. They're documented biology. And during Disability Pride Month, that's fuel for both celebration and policy change. The kaleidoscope we live each day is now etched in peer-reviewed ink. And that means the world has one less excuse not to build environments that fit. All four profiles underscore a core NACHOS teaching. Self-care starts with self-knowledge. When we understand how and when our brains diverge from the typical track, whether that's late blooming milestones, school-age social norms, or a quieter pattern that still saps energy, we can choose supports that actually nourish us. Early morning sensory breaks, midday movement scripts, evening anxiety cool downs. These aren't indulgences. They're precious tools matched to our developmental and very, very human wiring. Now, this study puts data behind that intuition, showing that each profile follows its own biological tempo. Honoring that tempo is the most practical form of self-care we can practice because it meets the nervous system where it already lives. Equally important, the findings invite a deeper self-acceptance. Knowing there are multiple, well-charted routes through autism loosens the grip of comparison. If your journey sits in the broadly affected lane, that doesn't make you behind. It means your brain took a route rich in early genetic detours, and your triumphs will be calibrated to that terrain. Life in moderate challenges lane may be quieter, but still deserves tailored supports. In NACHOS language, this study grants every NACHO a powerful mantra. My neurodivergence is a natural variation, not a personal flaw. And let that affirmation anchor your self-talk and your daily practices of care and grace. Let them shift from shoulds to rights you're fully entitled to claim. And speaking of rhythms that honor our wiring, let's talk about one of the weekly anchors many of us rely on, our Monday NACHOS meetup. That half hour to hour together is more than just content. It's a built-in pause button, a pocket of community where we get to refill our self-care toolkit and reset the narrative in our own favor. In the same way, the new research urges us to tailor supports to our natural tempo. We've been listening to your feedback about when NACHOS fits best into your day and nervous system. So here's the heads up and the reminder. Starting in September, as we launch season 3, the NACHOS podcast will slide from the morning start time to a noon start time on Mondays. Think of it as a lunch hour neuro-affirmation. Now, this will be an easier slot for folks juggling morning routines, classes, or for those all too common 10 a.m. Zoom marathons. It will also work wonders for our West Coast Nacho Nuts. So mark your planners now, build that sensory-friendly snack into your midday if you're on the East Coast, and join us as we keep turning research insights into real-life grace one Monday at a time. Because, Mondays have always had a bad reputation, and we're trying to change that. And not only us, but a new longitudinal study shows that the feeling isn't just in our heads, it's written in biology. Researchers from the University of Hong Kong followed more than 3,500 adults in the English longitudinal study of aging and discovered that those who reported feeling anxious, specifically on Mondays, carried 23% more cortisol in their hair for up to 2 months than people whose anxiety struck on other days. The effect held even for retirees. Now, this suggests that it's the cultural weight of Monday, not a looming workload, that imprints stress deep into the body's HPA axis. That's the system that governs our fight or flight response. Now, elevated prolonged cortisol, and I don't like cortisol, is a known driver of heart disease, and it mirrors the long-observed 19% spike in heart attacks that hospitals see at the start of each week. For neurodivergent folks, This anxious Monday phenomenon matters twice over. Many of us already juggle sensory overload, executive function strain, or social fatigue. Add a calendar-driven hormone surge, and the load amplifies. Crucially, only a quarter of the cortisol jump was due to feeling more anxious on Mondays. The rest came from Monday anxiety hitting the body harder than the same worry of any other day. In other words, the weekly reset itself is a stress multiplier. Knowing that the calendar can hijack our physiology transforms self-care from optional nicety to medical necessity. Let me say that again. Knowing this about our bodies transforms the idea of self-care from optional nicety to medical necessity. A Monday morning sensory pause, a movement circuit, or simply granting ourselves a slower start becomes a data-backed intervention rather than a personal preference. And also one of the main reasons why I set nachos on Monday. The idea of framing the week differently, of seeing Sunday differently, of seeing Monday morning differently. And this finding dovetails with core nachos themes of self-grace and neuroaffirmation. It reminds us that our bodies keep meticulous score of societal rhythms, even those we didn't choose. Recognizing that helps us swap self-blame, like why am I already exhausted, for self-understanding. My nervous system is reacting to a well-documented cultural stressor. Right? Armed with clarity, understanding, and knowledge, we can design compassionate routines, micro accommodations like noise-canceling headphones for the commute or for a midday grounding ritual on Monday. It will help buffer that Monday effect. In the broader nachos philosophy, turning research into personalized care is how we transform raw data into lived dignity. We meet our biology with intention, extend ourselves grace, and re-author the week's opening chapter on our own terms. If Monday's cortisol spike is the body's alarm, movement is the button that softens the ring. Meeting the week on our own terms isn't just about curating sensory inputs or pacing our inbox. It's about letting our muscles chew through that stress chemistry before it hardens into brain fog or creeping weight gain or something worse like heart disease. A 5-minute stretch between Zoom calls, a slow walk that doubles as a sensory break, or a living room dance party can rewrite the Monday narrative from brace for impact to something like ground, move, release. Now, keeping this in mind, Nacho Knots, because I want you to keep this in mind because the next 3 stories dig into that very terrain. How physical activity shapes stress, weight, and overall neuro well-being. And ultimately, how we can tailor movement to our own wiring. Doctors writing in the British Medical Journal, the PB&J, just called out our culture's endless shrink your waist drumbeat for what it is. Unhelpful at best, harmful at worst. After combing through decades of studies, they found that most people in larger bodies simply can't keep weight off for the long haul through standard diet and exercise prescriptions, and that the constant pressure to do so fuels stigma, anxiety, and disordered eating. Their big takeaway is refreshingly simple. Health is far bigger than the number on a bathroom scale or on a BMI scale. Real care should be weight inclusive, meeting people where they are and focusing on habits that actually boost well-being, like steadier blood pressure, deeper sleep, and movement that sparks joy, not dread. Early programs, such as Health at Every Size, are spotlighted as promising blueprints for this kinder, more realistic path towards health. For many neurodivergent folks, that message lands like a deeper exhale. Traditional just try harder advice often piles shame on top of sensory sensitivities, medication side effects, and even executive function hurdles. Hearing clinicians say the system was never designed for your success validates that what many nacho nuts have felt all along and known for a good long while. Repeated diet cycles rarely work and often leave lasting bruises. Naming weight stigma itself as a health risk opens space for gentler success markers. Mood lifting after a stroll, joints thanking you for a movement style that feels like play, meals that calm instead of stress. And that fits perfectly into our nachos ethos of self-care, self-grace, and daily neuroaffirmations. Instead of asking, how many calories did I burn? We can ask, did that stretch help my nervous system feel better? Instead of, am I lighter on the scale? We can ask, do I feel more awake, more grounded, more me? Your worth has never and never will be a BMI score. When we swap scale worship for body attunement, things that have been talked about in some medical circles for decades, every sip of water, every slow walk, every kind word to ourselves becomes an act of radical affirmation, care that meets our brains and bodies exactly where they are today. And so it's like what we see researchers saw at the University of Colorado when they set out to untangle a question that nags many of us every time we lace up our sneakers. Does exercise have to change the number on the scale to truly matter? Tracking more than 6,000 adults for 5 years, this team found that people who logged even modest amounts of weekly movement, think 3 brisk 20-minute walks or 2 short sessions of strength work, saw lower blood pressure spikes, steadier blood sugar, and measurably brighter mood scores, regardless of whether their weight budged at all. The benefits were the strongest when activity happened in bite-sized or micro-accommodative chunks, spread through the week, suggesting that our bodies like frequent movement snacks more than occasional marathon workouts. Published in the Journal of Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise, the study adds weight, yes, pun intended, to the idea that metabolism and mental health respond to motion itself, not just the promise of a shrinking waistline. For neurodivergent bodies, often dealing with fluctuating energy, sensory sensitivities, and medications that meddle with appetite and weight, these findings feel like a green light to move in ways that actually feel good instead of chasing punitive exercise quotas. A 10-minute dance break between tasks, a set of resistance bands pulled during a sensory reset, or a short walk while listening to a special interest podcast like Nachos can deliver real cardiovascular and mood gains without turning the gym into a guilt factory. The study also chips away at the myth that progress has to be visible on a bathroom scale. Internal metrics like steadier heart rate and lighter emotional load tell a richer, kinder, and let's be honest, more honest story. And this aligns perfectly with the pillars that we establish here at Nachos. By shifting the focus from calorie burn to nervous system regulation, we honor our bodies as they are today and invite joyful movement into our daily routine. Each micro workout becomes a neuroaffirmation, a way of telling ourselves, I move because it helps me feel grounded, not because I need to earn my dinner. In true Nachos fashion, our goal isn't to sculpt a certain silhouette, but to weave moments of motion into the fabric of everyday life. Moments that leave us calmer, clearer, and more at home in our own skin. Now, lastly, a new study from the University College of London offers a delightfully simple invitation for all of this. Pick workouts that vibe with your personality, and you're far more likely to stick with them. And you will feel the stress melt away as well. Researchers tracked participants over an 8-week fitness program and they found predictable patterns. Extroverts, for instance, lit up during high energy group-based sessions. Folks higher in neuroticism preferred training solo, thriving on short bursts with frequent breaks. Those scoring high on conscientiousness exercised whether or not they loved the session, while the naturally curious, high openness scores were game to try almost anything. Across the board, matching exercise style to temperament made workouts more enjoyable and produced bigger drops in stress. For neurodivergent movers, this is gold. Many of us wrestle with gyms that overwhelm the senses or routines that drain executive function. And what this research screams to us is customize it. If bright lights and loud music feel like sandpaper, swap the spin classes for a backyard walk with a favorite podcast like NACHOS. If you crave novelty, rotate movement snacks through the week. Yoga one day, resistance bands the next. And when exercise aligns with who we are, it stops feeling like punishment and starts acting like nervous system nourishment. And I've been feeling this lately. I've been trying to do this because movement isn't about chasing someone else's fitness idea. It's about syncing activity with our unique wiring so the body hears from us, I'm listening to you. I hear you, body. Whether that's a solo dance break in the kitchen or a friendly game of pickup basketball, the goal remains the same. That goal is joyous motion that leaves us feeling calmer, brighter, and more at home in our own skin. Period. That's the only goal. Now, if these last 3 studies teach us anything, it's that movement and nourishment aren't side quests. They're core mechanics in the game of self-care, especially for neurodivergent bodies that already ride a wild sensory roller coaster. Exercise clears cortisol, steadies glucose, and brightens mood even when the scale doesn't budge. Diet shapes energy and focus long after the last bite is chewed. But the real magic happens when we tailor both to our wiring. Honoring whether we're stimulation seekers who need spicy flavors and loud playlists to stay engaged, or sensory avoiders who thrive on softer lighting and gentler textures, or, like myself, a little bit of both. Now, I've lived that lesson in my own skin. Dropping nearly 200 pounds wasn't about white-knuckle willpower. It was about decoding my sensory grammar. I realized I reached for crunchy, salty, sugary snacks when my brain craved auditory input and flocked to heavier comfort foods when my proprioceptive tank was empty and I wanted to feel that stuffed full feeling. Swapping chips for a quick drumming session and trading late night fast food for a weighted blanket and a calming tea rewired the craving loop. Movement, too, shifted from burn calories to feed senses. A dusk walk for visual calm, resistance bands for proprioceptive feedback, a kitchen dance break when my auditory channels begged for rhythm. The weight loss was a side effect. The real win was feeling at home in a body finally listened to. So when we talk self-care in the NACHOS community, we're not prescribing a one-size-fits-all workout plan or a universal meal chart. We're inviting each other to become sensory detectives. Notice what your body is really asking for and meet that need with kindness. And let health emerge as a byproduct of the dialogue. Movement and food aren't chores to conquer. They're love letters we write to our own nervous systems, reminding them that every signal, every quirk, every craving is worthy of curiosity and care. And some days, the news scroll feels like leaning too close to a loudspeaker, crackling with static and spite. Headlines jolt, comment threads burn, and every casual conversation seems to end with, "Whose side are you on?" For neurodivergent nervous systems, already tuned a notch higher, those frequencies cut deep. In times like these, self-care shifts from spa day luxury to survival art. The daily practice of turning down the world's volume long enough to hear your own heartbeat is vitally important. That art begins with boundaries that are bold as love. We set timers on doom scrolling. We mute threads that weaponize fatigue and unfollow voices that confuse cruelty with wit. Once the static quiets, we fill the space with regulation rituals. Weighted blankets, playlists that sync breath with beat, a stroll that gives worries somewhere physical to travel. These aren't escapes from reality, they're scaffolding that let us stay present without fracturing. We also curate inputs that remind us people are still generous, funny, and fiercely kind. We gather stories of mutual aid, savor micro joys, that snap of fresh veggies, the warmth of a mug held in both hands, the rhythm of a quick resistant band circuit. Each tiny joy whispers, "You're still here, and you are worth tending." And in NACHOS fashion, self-care blooms into a community of care, sharing grounding tricks, checking on friends who log off suddenly, using empathy as an antidote to the vitriol we refuse to absorb. So here's the question for the week. When the world gets loud, which small ritual, movement, food, sound, or silence reminds you that you're human first and opinion second? So again, when the world gets loud, which small ritual, movement, food, sound, or silence reminds you that you're human first and opinion second? I want you to drop your answer in the chat, and let's build a living library of micro joys we can borrow from one another whenever the static creeps back in. If you need some sparks to get you thinking, here are a few micro joy rituals other Nacho Knots have shared with me. For movement snacks, 3 gentle shoulder rolls every time you hit send on an email, helping that tension flow as the message flies off. You can use a taste anchor, a deliberate, slowed down sip of iced lemon water, bright, tart, and cold enough to pull attention back into the present, kind of like an Altoid or something sour. You can do a sound shelter, one song you never skip, like, one of my favorites from my econ professor, Jan Palmer, Here Comes the Sun, right? You can play those through headphones with your eyes closed for the full 3 minutes. No multitasking allowed, just that music break. Or what about a silence pocket? Stepping onto the porch at night, letting darkness muffle the day, and counting 5 full breaths before re-entering the house. Or a texture reset, running your palms across a favorite knit blanket or the bark of a backyard maple tree, reminding your skin you're more than just a brain on a screen. And here's a personal one from my own week. Lately, I've been working with 3 flexible energy blocks. Instead of penciling exact start and stop times, first comes a body block, some kind of movement that feels regulating right then, maybe resistance bands while a playlist hums, or a quick lap outside if the weather is kind, maybe in the pool or even a dance party. Once my muscles have had their say, I shift into a spark block for creativity. That could be sketching ideas for the next Nachos bumper, free writing half a page of jokes, or noodling on a new coaching worksheet or neuro nibble script. I protect this block from email pings, but I let its length breathe. Some days the spark is 10 minutes, other days it's 40. And last comes a restorative block. Eyes closed breath work, a weighted blanket pause, a swing on my hammock, or a cup of tea sipped without scrolling. I aim to touch all three blocks each afternoon, yet I let the order and duration drift with how my body and brain feels, planning and presence. Meetings orbit the blocks, but if life crowds in, I compress rather than cancel. 5 mindful stretches still count as a body block, and 2 minutes of box breathing still qualifies as restorative. Working in blocks keeps the world from gobbling every ounce of bandwidth while honoring the truth of my neurodivergent energy, because it isn't clock uniform. Some days the spark block needs to lead, and on heavy brain days, I might start with the rest so creativity has room to bloom later. The point isn't perfect adherence. It's having anchors sturdy enough to prevent freefall, yet loose enough to sway with the day. The way self-care, creativity, and rejuvenation aren't optional extras, they're built-in pulses that keep me present, even when the outside world feels like it's taking more than it gives. Over the past few segments, we've traced a through line that starts deep in our DNA and stretches all the way to the soles of our sneakers. First came the Nature genetics study that split the spectrum into 4 clear development patterns, showing once and for all that autism isn't a single story, but a library of biographies, each chapter written in its own timing with its own genetic link. That finding echoes a core NACHOS truth. Real inclusion begins when we honor the precise shape of someone's wiring instead of forcing every brain into the same blueprint. Then we zoomed out to the calendar itself, learning that Mondays carry a measurable hormonal punch. Older adults who feel anxious at the week's starting, they hold that extra cortisol in their hair for months. And it's proof that culture, not just circumstance, can ratchet up our stress circuits. For Nacho Knots, that data turns boundary setting and micro joy rituals into non-negotiables. They aren't indulgences. They're biology's antidote to society's loudest day. Our next stop challenged the weight loss gospel. We looked at the British Medical Journal and how it peeled back decades of evidence and found that most people can't sustain major weight changes. And the pressure to do so often harms more than it heals. That message dovetails with the neuro-affirmation. Health lives in steady blood pressure, deep sleep, and joyful movement, not in bathroom scale numbers. It invites us to swap punitive calorie math for kinder metrics. Did my walk settle my nerve? Did dinner leave me clearer headed? 2 exercise studies sealed the deal. University of Colorado researchers showed that short, consistent movement snacks lower blood pressure and lift mood even when weight stays put. University of College in London added that matching workouts to personality and by extension sensory profile predicts whether we'll keep showing up for and feel less stress afterwards. Translation for all of this: our bodies don't crave one perfect routine. They crave movement and motion that feels like us. Whether that's a solo stretch with headphones or a rowdy group dance session. Taken together, these findings sketch the NACHOS roadmap for turbulent times. Know your wiring, guard your rhythms, measure wellness in regulation, not restriction, and let movement be a conversation with your senses instead of a war with your waistline. When we thread those principles through daily life, be it in flexible energy blocks, midday grounding walks, or the gentle refusal to let Mondays bully our cortisol, we turn self-care from a buzzword into a steady practice of self-grace. And that, my dear nacho knots, is how we keep our humanity shining even when the world crackles with that static. And if today's episode gave your nervous system that little sigh of relief, I'd love for you to keep that ripple going. Hit follow on your favorite podcast app. Hit subscribe here on YouTube so that you never miss a Monday reset. Scoot over to our socials for your daily micro joy prompts. And if you're able, drop a couple of dollars in the Humanities 101 tip jar on our website to fuel more neuro-affirming goodness. While you're there, peek at the events tab and snag your spot for the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference on October 24th in Dearborn. This is a full day of stories, strategy, and solidarity you won't want to miss. Every follow, share, and gift is a vote for a world where wiring is celebrated, not shamed, and I'm grateful for each one. And that, dearest nacho knots, brings our journey full circle. From the genes that first tuned our frequencies, to the tiny rituals that steady us when the world gets loud, to the collective heartbeat we create when we gather each week. As you step back into your day, cradle these reminders like warm stones in your pocket. Your brain's roadmap, whether it curves through social norms, late blooming milestones, or quiet constellations of difference, it's not a detour. It's a hand-drawn treasure map that leads you home to yourself every single time. A calendar date can't dictate your worth. When Monday's cortisol surge waves its flag, wave back. Breathe deep and lace your moments with micro joys that speak your sensory dialect. Health lives in the spark that flickers after a gentle stretch, the hush that settles after a balanced meal, and the grin that rises when movement feels like play, never in a glowing scale number. Motion is a conversation, not a punishment. Let your personality and your senses pick the playlist, the pace, and the place. Your body will answer in the language of relief. Boundaries built of love keep your empathy from running dry. Blocks of rest, creativity, and gentle movement refill the well so kindness can keep flowing without cracking the pitcher. Tuck these truths close and whisper them whenever the static starts to hiss. I'm wired for wonder, and my wiring is welcome here. My body's cues are invitations, never, ever inconveniences. Every breath, every stretch, every small joy is a step towards balance. I honor my needs without apology, and by doing so, I create space for others to do the same. Feel that subtle thrum in your chest? Do you feel that? That's belonging. That punch in your gut? That's community. And that's us, scattered across kitchen tables and time zones, lifting one another up with every shared breath of grace. So thank you for sharing this hour, this curiosity, and this boundless care with me. Until we meet again, keep tending your nervous system like the rare ecosystem that it is. Scatter micro joy where the static once crackled, and believe fiercely, tenderly, that you deserve every room, every friendship, in every horizon your heart longs to explore. Stay gentle, stay curious, and stay gloriously, unrepeatably you. I'll catch you next episode, and together we'll keep navigating the wide cosmos of this neuro-affirming life, one compassionate pulse, one radical breath, one shimmering moment of humanity at a time.